Hello, everyone, and welcome to Student Housing Unlocked, multi-housing news' podcast series that delves into investments, strategies, operations, and different approaches in the student housing sector. I'm Olivia Bunescu, Associate Editor, and for this podcast episode, I'll discuss with Brandt Stiles, founding partner and co-CEO of Subtext Living, a company with over 1.6 billion in projects completed that leverages data for making development and investment decisions. In this episode, you'll learn more about Subtext's current projects, what residents expect from student housing communities, and how can developers tackle challenges in the industry. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation to Student Housing Unlocked. This is MHN's podcast series, which discusses basically everything student housing related. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I have been following Subtext's activity for a while now. So I'm really interested in your approach because I know you have a data-driven approach for your developments. And once again, thank you very much for accepting my invitation to share your insights on student housing development.
Olivia, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'll start with the first question. And I was wondering, what are the most significant trends you're currently observing in the student housing market, both in terms of development and investment?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, we're seeing a lot of change in the student housing sector. And when we talk about the student housing sector, we're really talking about specific universities. And our thesis from day one has always been around developing in best-in-class locations and best-in-class markets. And that thesis has really played out and worked really well for us because the fundamentals around the university, in really higher education, has changed a lot post-COVID. We're seeing the markets as really a tale of two cities. The large public flagship schools are seeing a robust enrollment growth. And we believe that's because the current generation, the Gen Zers, they really value return on investment. And when they look at their investment in college and their investment in university, they see the best bang for their buck in the large public, power, used to call them Power 5. Now it's really a Power 4 conference public schools. I think one thing to note there is these universities that have a large amount of applications have historically been able to dictate the size of their university, just reducing the standards for accepting a student. And one thing that's been really surprising since about 2021, a lot of these large public schools are increasing their enrollment, but at the same time, they're increasing the quality of the student. And that's really exciting for us because that is the playground that we play in, and the higher quality student in these universities just continues to increase the notoriety of these large public schools, increases the quality of education, and I think improves the investment thesis for our investors from a long-term perspective.
Having mentioned that, could you walk us through how you approach student housing development in terms of market selection, project size, and the main factors you're considering before kicking off a new project?
Yeah. Like you said in the beginning, we take a data-driven approach to almost every decision that we make within the organization, whether it's market selection, site selection, building design, programming. It all starts, we're very process-driven as well. It all starts with assessing markets, and we're assessing the top 100 markets in the country to really narrow that down to what we believe are the top 25, and then we narrow that down to the top 10. And us as an organization, we're agnostic geographically on where we focus our time. We really let the data drive our decision on where we should be spending all of our effort on an annual basis, trying to secure the best development sites in the country. So we identify what we believe are the best markets, and that is really going to be dictated by enrollment growth, the university's desire to grow and ability to grow. A lot of these universities want to grow, but sometimes they don't have the capital for it. Sometimes they don't have the right planning. Sometimes they don't have the right administration. So really getting an in-depth understanding of the university and their desires is extremely important. And then looking at the supply and demand fundamentals of the market. We are capturing third-party data. We're warehousing our own internal data and using that information to really identify what markets have a supply and demand imbalance, and what that supply and demand imbalance really looks like. Is that imbalance pedestrian to campus housing? Is that which is usually more expensive and higher quality, or is the imbalance a more affordable housing that would typically be a little bit further away from campus? So we're not just making assumptions based on what we think is best for the future resident, but really using data to help us drive our decisions.
And I know that investment and both the investment and development actually have had pretty much a slowdown in student housing, a slight slowdown due to economic volatility and rising construction costs. Could you touch a bit on the challenges that come with building student housing?
There's a lot of challenges these days, a lot of them. And I think the number one challenge is affordability. And what we've really done over the last few years is do everything we can to increase the efficiency of our buildings, so we can bring our cost basis down, but also look at the markets from a perspective of what market rents have the ability to continue to grow. What market rents have not grown as fast as some of the other markets? What markets have a more affluent resident or student base than others that can afford higher rents? Because construction costs over the last 3 years have increased dramatically. We have seen those costs level off, and in some markets they've slightly gone down. But as the spigot turns back on, as it relates to development and construction, those construction costs are always going to go up. So what we have to do as an organization is, deal with those challenges, and try to work around them. So making sure that our buildings are extremely efficient, making sure that we don't have wasted space, making sure that we're providing the amenities that are in demand for not the residents of 5, 10, 15 years ago, but the residents of today and in the future. And that's changed. And I think that's one of the things that I've really learned as a business owner, that the assumptions that you have are not always accurate. And when we started the company, we felt like we were really connected and in tune with what the residents wanted. And I think over the last 10 years, we've come to realize that those desires and wants change based on generations, based on markets. And we have to use data to truly understand what those desires, wants, and needs are, instead of just making assumptions or doing what we've done in the past.
So earlier on, you mentioned that you narrowed down your options from 25 to 10 markets slash institutions, and that you pretty much look at market fundamentals and
Yes.
institution fundamentals. Are there any other types of data that you look at when you think about a new project? If you could give some examples of that.
Yeah, when we're thinking about a new project, we're taking as much information as we can in. I think what's one of the hardest things for a developer when you're building a new project, specifically in the student housing, is to truly understand your resident, what their socioeconomic background is, what their level of affluence is, their desires for different types of amenities, whether they're more social or more focused on academics. that dictates your amenities, that it dictates your programming, that it dictates your unit mix. One thing that we did last year, because we always struggled at trying to really create what we believed was the best unit mix for that project, was we created a unit mix unit. We have a data scientist in house, and he created a unit mix optimizer. So what it does is it looks at it pulls in data of absorption of all the different units, ones, twos, threes, fours, 5 bedroom units. Is there bed bath parity? Is there not? And it uses an algorithm that calculates what the best and most optimal unit mix would be for a future building. It's one of those things that has always been a struggle for us to try to perfect. And in no way is this perfect, but it gets us to a much better starting point to tweak. And I think that's just one other thing from a data perspective that's really allowed us to make better decisions faster. And it's proven out to be more accurate because with the right unit mix, it creates quicker absorption, higher occupancy, and higher renewals.
I'm just a curious person. Did you get to the right unit mix? And if you can share what it was?
Every market has a different unit mix, and every location within a market requires a different unit mix. And it's really who your audience is. Is it freshmen, sophomores? Is it juniors, seniors? Is it graduate students? And what combination of it is it? And really, it has, for us, it has to do with geographically, where is our site positioned around some of the classrooms and the colleges around the university. So are we tailoring to the nursing school? Are we tailoring to the law school or to the business school or the engineering school? Try not to stereotype, but there's going to be certain stereotypes for each one of those specific colleges within a university. And depending on where our building is geographically located, it will cater better to one or the other. So using that input really helps us dictate what the right unit mix is for that market and that location.
I wrote the Student Housing Outlook, and the president of Core Spaces made a pretty good point that you need to look at the local fabric of each market to cater to basically students' needs and the university needs, because they differ from one market to the other. And what you said right now actually complements the point that he made. So
yeah. 100%. It's every deal has to be contextual. And I think we've done a really good job of not looking at every market the same, but really digging into the details and the context of every market, both from a programming perspective, from a design and aesthetics perspective, and from an overall resident experience, even from a programming perspective. There's going to be different markets that require different type. We take a hospitality approach, and we're very involved in that resident experience. That resident experience isn't the same from market to market.
That's right. I was wondering if you have any examples when using the data-driven approach, or maybe the data that you pulled out significantly improved the outcome of a certain project. And if you could share that example.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really unique for us is we're using data to predict where rents will go, because what's important from a profit and loss perspective when you're looking at a pro forma on a project is, can rents grow in this market? And because if rents aren't growing, your returns are going to struggle, ultimately, because I think expenses are always going to grow. So your rents need to keep up with your expense growth and hopefully outpace that. And what we've done is we've used data to predict what markets have the ability for rents to grow the most. And that's one of the leading indicators from a market selection perspective of where we spend our time. outside of pulling data around like regional population trends, university specific factors.
Yeah.
Um, that that's that's I think really, really important. We just take a robust data-driven approach to ensure we have an informed market and site selection, focusing on leading indicators of performance to stay ahead of the trends rather than really to react to them.
Thank you. And underutilized spaces can also become a challenge in student housing. In what ways can the data-driven approach that you're using or those insights help address these challenges of underutilized spaces or overall improving the efficiency in student housing, the
Yeah.
operational efficiency?
Yeah, I think there's really 2 points to that. One is the collection of data through technology that we have in our properties. So all of our properties have key card access from exterior doors in through the amenity section, all of the different amenities into their unit. And one of the things that we can do is we can capture all of that foot traffic data. So we can capture how long someone's spending in a study room. We can capture how long someone's spending in the gym or how long someone is spending in their unit. And what that does is it really helps us understand the optimization of certain amenities within a project. And where if a building is already built, it's hard to repurpose that. But
Mm-hmm.
what we can do is we can make our projects in the future better, from making sure that we are optimizing the space with the amenities that are being utilized the most. Um, Number two, um, when it comes to optimization, we spend of space, we spend a lot of time from a due diligence perspective, pre-design on a building, boots on the ground in the market. And when I mean boots on the ground in the market, we hire a couple companies to help us do surveys, and we're surveying 3 to 4 to 500 people to understand what their preferences are. Do they want bed bath parity? Where do they see value in a pool? Where do they see value in a fitness center? Where do they see value in study spaces? Some schools, the general population is more academic. Some schools, the population is more social. And we need to tailor our buildings to that market. So bringing in data around surveys. And then the other piece is focus groups, really sitting the resident down and having a conversation with them, a future resident. Like before we even engage our architects, where we're getting in, we're trying to understand what these future residents of ours, what they value. And sometimes what's more important is what they don't value. And we don't want to create spaces that are just there for marketing purposes to put in a pretty brochure. We want to create experience driven properties that are helping our residents live their best lives. And we can't, because every market is different and everyone's needs are different, we can't do that without being truly engaged very, very early on and taking that data to help influence what we build.
And I suppose that this kind of data also helps you optimize occupancy for the properties that you own and manage. Those are correlated,
100%.
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. If we don't have the right unit mix, if we don't have the right amenity package, if
Yeah.
we're not providing the right resident experience, then it's all about reputation. Whether it's the reputation that you're creating in the beginning of a project through your marketing and leasing efforts, or it's the reputation that you're creating through the actual operations of your properties, and the reviews that you're getting, the social media that you're putting out, and the word of mouth, which is one of the most important forms of marketing for us in these university towns. That all impacts your ability to renew, which renewal rates are extremely, extremely important in the student housing space. And I think I think we have some of the highest renewal rates because we are so engaged, because we are so purposeful, and our buildings are so contextual. Um, Maintaining those renewal rates, understanding what the resident wants, making sure that we're delivering efficient units that we can deliver to our future residents at a attainable price point. Uh, at the end of the day, that's impacting occupancy, that's impacting our renewals, um, and impacting the overall success of the project.
And besides the boots on the ground strategy that you use, are there any other strategies that you employ to ensure that you provide a great living experience for residents while maintaining efficiency throughout your portfolio?
I think there's the bells and whistles when it comes to, having a hospitality approach to property management. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing that is really overlooked and really not talked about as much on the property management side is just going back to the basics, doing the simple things, providing prompt and clear communication. When it comes to work orders, having quick work order turnaround times, being responsive when there's requests from the residents. Our residents, we love them to death. They're going through a transition period in their life where they're finding out they are, they're maturing, they're evolving, and this is the first time they've really lived by themselves. So
That's
are we
right.
their parents sometimes, and do we have to act like their parents sometimes? Yeah, but at the same time, we have to set the example. Like we are very, very involved in the operation side. Who is the individuals that are running our properties are like the key to our success. And that's why we brought property management in-house about 2 years ago, because we didn't feel that third-party property management was a benefit to us because we weren't able to select and really dictate who was the face of our organization and really dictating that resident experience. So getting back to basics, providing empathy and being fully engaged, and then I think is really really important as well. And then having technology there, not for just technology's sakes, but having technology there for convenience and getting some of the minutia and the you know the day-to-day basic tasks that our property management team used to have to deal with, automating those, improving the operational efficiencies. We're not trying to cut staffing. We're just trying to be able to refocus our staff so that they can focus more on the resident experience. They can focus more on, making sure that everyone's living their best lives instead of, collecting the payables and making sure that checks are cut, really focusing on that hospitality approach and using technology on the back end to make sure that we can increase our face-to-face engagement.
So you already mentioned that you have a hospitality-driven approach, which is on the rise in student housing and other real estate asset types as well, as I have
Yep.
noticed. And you also have a strategy based on experience-based design.
Mhm.
So could you elaborate on what that looks like throughout your portfolio? What are some of the activities that you propose, if there are any? And what are some specific amenities or design features that students look for nowadays more than
Yeah.
before?
Yeah, absolutely. So the hospitality-driven approach for us means delivering an experience that goes beyond the basic living accommodations. Um, it mirrors the care, the comfort, and the service associated with like a premier hotel and
Yeah.
consumer brands. This philosophy is reflected in both our operational strategies and our physical design, and it's really figuring out how to mirror those two, really bring those two together. And for us, it really starts in the beginning with what we call our emotional missions. And those are the experiences that a resident has in our property on a day-to-day basis, whether it's the when they're walking up to the building into the front door. What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to sound like? What do we want it to smell like? The signage, the wayfinding. So that's like our pragmatic mission. The inspirational mission that a resident will have is like, how do we continue to inspire our residents? These, like I said before, these residents are going through an evolution and really identifying who they are and what they want. we like to create beautiful things, and we want our buildings to inspire our residents. We want them to be excited. We want them to walk in and be like, wow, this is great. I want to show my friends. So we build world-class gyms. We really focus on designing and bringing in some world-class interior designers to really build quality spaces. There's the social mission, there's the, collective private mission, there's, the overall private mission. So like the social mission is we're going to create a space where people can have fun. This is college. The college experience is very, very important. We're not going to try to say, hey, our building, we don't want you to have fun. We just want you to focus on academics. That's just not happening. But we want to do it in a thoughtful and purposeful way. But we know that students don't want to experience that all the time. So it's these other missions, like the collective private mission, is, a lot. It's thinking about if you were at like a Starbucks, you're there studying, you're sort of private, but you also want to be out in front of everybody. You want to be social, but you want to have your headphones on. So creating experiences in physical spaces to facilitate that. I think the last one is just like the unlonely mission, where we're trying to take somebody from like a lonely mindset to a social mindset. And I think a lot of these emotional missions that we have are fostered and facilitated by the built environment. So what we really think about is, what amenities do we have in our property that are going to foster these emotional missions, and what are the adjacencies of these amenities, and do they make sense from a wayfinding perspective, from an overall experience perspective? And we think about lighting, and we think about the amount of energy that each one has, and we want to transition high energy to low energy to high energy. So we're being really, really thoughtful in all of our amenities. And when we think about some of the most popular amenities today, I think it's different than it was 10 years ago. The wellness approach, wellness is really, really important. Whether it's, we build world-class fitness facilities within, world-class meaning, very, very high-end fitness facilities for an apartment complex. We put in these wellness studios that have saunas, meditation rooms, yoga studios, and then there's the social and the study aspect. There has been a huge shift of minimizing some of the social spaces and shifting a lot of those spaces to study. And there's all different types of study locations and spaces that we create. A lot of it is multi-purpose, but a lot of it is going to be isolated study, put your head down, some other group study spaces, but it's just very, very thoughtful and strategic to facilitate the emotional missions that we know our residents have within our properties.
I'd like to discuss a bit about your portfolio and your expansion plans. And if you could highlight some of Subtext Living's flagship projects in student housing, and what are some of the particularities that make those projects stand out from other developers?
Yeah. When it comes to our portfolio, we've built or have under construction close to, I think it is 21,000 beds since our inception in 2014. Our philosophy is to build communities from the resident up, tailoring each development to meet the unique needs of the resident. Trying to create environments designed specifically to support that student lifestyle. And I think a couple examples of us doing it really well, a deal we delivered last year in Boise, Idaho, a growing university, somewhat of a smaller university, about 14,000 students. We delivered a deal that was a 3-story project over 1 story of underground parking, and did it in a very cost-effective way to help maintain a lower basis in our project and to create attainable at an attainable price point while being in a irreplaceable location. So I think that's one project that really stands out that I think is a good example of what can be done in the student housing space to keep pricing at an attainable price point. Another one is a deal that we delivered in West Lafayette, which is Verve West Lafayette, that caters to Purdue University. It's about 751 beds. And when you look at this project, I think it's from an architectural perspective, it's probably one of the projects that I'm most proud of. It was done in such a contextual way that, I always really push our architects. I want it to look like it was built in the current year that it was built in, but I also want it to stand the test of time. So in 20, 30, 40 years, when people look back at that building, they're like, oh, that was a really well-designed building. I think this really showcases that significant architectural design, but it also showcases pedestrian-friendly elements within a really inviting street-level visibility, great first-floor retail, phenomenal amenity package, and just a real great wow factor when you walk into the lobby. Double height space with a mezzanine level, walking up to a really cool pool courtyard. It's another one that I'm really excited about. And I think the last one, if I'll throw 3 out there, is a 12-story high rise in Madison, Wisconsin, that we delivered last year. About 536 beds. And I think the project just came together really, really well. It's adjacent to the university, like what we call fall out of bed location when you're a resident. Instead of having to wake up an hour earlier and get on a shuttle 2 to 3 miles of campus, these are the types of locations where you're waking up 10 minutes before class starts, brushing your teeth, rolling out of bed, and you're in class within 10 minutes. And it's just one of those locations that is just irreplaceable. And I think that's been like that, the framework of those 3 projects, from a location perspective, quality of architectural and interior design, and really the focus on the attainability side is really the framework of everything that we're trying to do in the student housing space right now.
Do you also plan to enter any new markets soon?
We're always exploring new markets, and on a annual basis, we sort of wipe the surface clean, and we use the data to tell us where we should be focusing our time. So there's a lot of markets that fundamentals are strong. There's a lot of markets where fundamentals aren't strong. And right now we're focused on what we believe are 10 of the best markets. This year we closed on 6 development projects. University of Central Florida, University of South Carolina, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Arizona State University, Washington University in St. Louis, and the University of Virginia.
And is there any project from the ones you mentioned that you're particularly excited about?
I think if
All of them.
out of all of those that we started this year, for a lot of reasons, there's one market that's just been on our list of markets that we've wanted to transact in. One, because it's the barriers to entry are very high. It's hard to find development sites that sort of check our boxes around location, and a deal that we did at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville is, number one, the largest deal to date. It's about 1,300 beds, about 450 units, about 25,000 square feet of internal amenities. And it is, like I said, similar to our Madison deal, a fall out of bed location. It's a 4-acre site, sort of overlooked by many, adjacent to the university, on 2 sides, very adjacent to the university grounds, And when you think of an ideal student housing location, from our perspective, this is it. So there's a huge student housing shortage. There's low supply in the pipeline, and overall, we're really excited to see this one deliver and see how it performs. And I think the last thing is there's as this student housing market evolves, we're seeing a lot of our competitors and a lot of groups see it as having a harder and harder and harder time securing the right sites for development. There's no low-hanging fruit anymore as it relates to development sites. So a lot of our competitors are, because of the challenge of finding great sites, they're less willing to sell off their existing property because they're finding good sites, they're building good properties, and they're wanting to hold long term, and they're finding the right capital to do so. So there's a lot less high quality product that's coming into the market from a sale perspective to transact. And we see that as a trend that is going to continue. And we're moving in that direction as well, where we are looking at recapitalizing our development deals and holding them long term. In addition, starting to acquire other groups' assets to inorganically build our holdings internally and increase our assets under management.
Looking ahead, and this is my last question, I wanted to ask you about some other predictions for the sector, because you already mentioned one. And if you have any expectations, if you have any predictions about how it will evolve, particularly from a development side.
Yeah, from the development side, I believe that the larger universities are going to continue to grow, and you're going to see the strongest supply and demand imbalance driven by enrollment growth. Two, I think rates are going to be higher for longer, interest rates, which is going to continue to put pressure on development. And for development deals to get done, you're going to have some really strong factors to offset those higher rates. And I really think that's going to be, making sure that you have to be in the right market and you have to have the best location. If you don't, I think getting development deals done, not going to say is going to be impossible, but it's going to be really hard because even if you're in the best market and you have a really good location, getting deals done is hard. It's not easy. Access to capital is hard, and there's a lot of indecisiveness in the institutional capital space of when is the right time to come back in to the development world. And I think the last thing that is going to continue to make it hard is a lot of these deals are getting large, really big. The check sizes to get, these deals where, 5 to 7 years ago, these were $60 to $80 million projects. And now they're 120 to 180, 120, and deals are getting bigger. So like deals are getting, to a point where our smallest deal is 120 million. Our biggest deal is north of 300 million. And the amount of capital partners, institutional capital partners that are in the space right now that have funds or the ability to cut checks that are north of $100 million just for equity, there's not a lot of them. So because the deals are getting harder, the amount of equity partners out there that are investing in the space that can cut checks for large deals is getting smaller because the deals are getting smaller. It's just going to make it harder for others to get stuff done. So I think deals will get done. I just know that it's hard, and I don't see it easing. I don't see that changing in the next 12 months.
Thank you very much for accepting the invitation to being a guest on Student Housing Unlocked, and that it was a pleasure talking to you.
It was a great pleasure talking with you as well. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thank you very much and have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for listening to Student Housing Unlocked. Make sure to tune in for the next episode of our series in March. For more news, trend stories, and podcast episodes, visit multihousingnews.com. Moreover, don't hesitate to join MHN's Executive Council. Every month, we discuss the latest trends and topics with leading experts in the field, and your input could be extremely helpful. To join, please send an email to jessica.fiur@cpe-mhn.com. Looking forward to seeing you on our next episode, and don't forget to rate this one.